Hi guys! Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're going to give a summary for chapter 2 which include to 2.1 up to those chapters. So let's start. Um, as you can see in this chapter, um, chapter 2 configured a network operating system. In this chapter, there are sections and objectives. In 2.1, iOS Bootcamp, explain the features and functions of the Cisco iOS software, explain the purpose of Cisco iOS, explain how to access a Cisco iOS device for configuration for process, explain how to navigate Cisco iOS to configure network devices, describe the command structure of Cisco iOS software. In 2.2 naman, there is basic device configuration, configure initial settings on a network device using the Cisco iOS software, configure host names on a Cisco iOS device using the CLI, use Cisco iOS commands to limit access to device configurations, use iOS commands to save the running configuration. In chapter 2, in 2.3, address the schemes. So we are given an IP addressing scheme, configure IP address parameters on device to provide end-to-end connectivity in a small to medium-sized business network. Explain how devices communicate across network media. Configure a host device with an IP address. Verify connectivity between two end devices. So in 2.1, there is iOS Bootcamp. As you can see, the operating system, all electronic devices require an operating system, Windows, Mac, Linux for PCs and laptops, Apple iOS and Android for smartphones and tablets. Cisco iOS for network devices, which is switches, routers, wireless, AP or firewall. So in this chapter, there is a shell which is either command line interface, or we can call CLI, or a graphical interface, which is GUI, and enables a user to interface with applications. Kernel communicates directly with the hardware and manages hardware so resources are used to meet software requirements. And lastly, we have hardware. Hardware is a physical part of a computer, including underlying electronics. Next, purpose of OS. So, what is the purpose of OS? In this, using a GUI enable a user to use a mouse to make selection and run programs, enter text and text-based commands. Also, using a CLI on a Cisco iOS switch or router enables a network technician to use a keyboard to run CLI-based network programs, use a keyboard to enter text and text-based commands, and especially there are many distinct variations of Cisco iOS. iOS for switches, routers, and other Cisco networking devices, iOS numbered versions for a given Cisco networking devices. Purpose of OS. All devices come with a default iOS and feature set. It is possible to upgrade the iOS version or feature set. And iOS can be downloaded from cisco.com. And however, a Cisco connection or online or CCO account is required. Note that the focus of this course will be on Cisco iOS release 15X. As you can see, there is a download software. We can see the LAN-based with a, what's that? The device? Oh my god. So we are going to the next. Access methods. The three most common ways to access the iOS are console port. The console port is like that color blue in the cable, like that. Out of band serial port is primarily for management purposes, such as the initial configuration of the router. Secure shell, or what we can say SSH. In-band method for remotely and securely establishing a CLI session over network. User authentication passwords and commands sent over the network are encrypted. As a best practice, use SSH instead of Telnet whenever possible. And what is a Telnet? Telnet is a in-band interface remotely establishing a CLI session through a virtual interface or over a network. User authentication, passwords, and commands are sent over the network in plain text. Note that the AUX port is an older method of establishing a CLI session remotely via a telephone set-up communication using a modem. So here we are here in terminal emulation program. Regardless of access method, a terminal emulation program will be required. Popular terminal emulation programs include PATI, Terra, Term, Secure CRT, and OS X Terminal. As you can see, there is a PATI configuration. There is a category which is the session, the window, and the connection. And every category there is a included logging in session, terminal, keyboard, bell, features in the window, appearance, behavior, translation, selection, and colors. While in the connection, there is a data, proxy, telnet, rlogin, SSH, and serial. So if you use to click the SSH, you can click the open so you can proceed to the configuration. So Cisco iOS modes of operation. The Cisco iOS modes use a hierarchical command structure. Each mode has a distinctive prompt and it is used to accomplish a particular task with a specific set of commands that are available only that mode. So as you can see, there are different kinds of modes operation. To navigate the iOS, there is a primary command modes. The user exec mode allows only a limited number of basic monitoring commands, often referred to as view-only mode. By default, there is no authentication required to access the user exec mode, but should be secured. The privileged exec mode allows the execution of configuration and management commands, often referred to as enable mode, because it requires the enable user exec command. By default, there is no authentication required to access the user exec mode, but it should be secured. As you can see, there is a command mode, description, default. In the user exec mode allows access to only a limited number of basic monitoring commands, like switch and router. And in privileged exec mode allows access to all commands and features. So, as you can see, there is a different description in the user exec mode and privileged exec mode. In privileged exec mode, the device prompt is switch hashtag and router hashtag. Let's go to the next chapter. Configuration command modes. The primary configuration mode is called global configuration or simply global config. Specific subconfiguration modes can be accessed from global configuration mode. Each of these modes allow the configuration of a particular part or function of the iOS service, interface mode, and the line mode. Interface mode is to configure one of the network interface, line mode to configure the console, AUX, Telnet, or SSH access. Navigate between iOS modes. Various commands are used to move in and out of commands prompts. To move from user exec mode to privileged exec mode, use the enable command. Use return to user exec mode, use the disable command. Various methods can be used to exit or quit configuration modes. Exit, used to move from a specific mode to the previous more general mode, such as from interface mode to global config. We are familiar in exit, right? So end can be used to exit out of global configuration mode regardless of which configuration mode you are in. Now, navigate between iOS modes. The following provides an example of navigating between iOS modes. Where this is called enter global config mode using the configure terminal command. Enter interface subconfig mode using the interface FA01 command. Exit out of each mode using exit command. A Cisco iOS device supports many commands. Each iOS command has a specific format or syntax and can only be executed at the appropriate mode. Keyword: a specific parameter defined in an operating system. In the figure, IP protocols. Argument: not a predefined, a value or variable defined by the user in the figure. After entering each complete command, including any keywords and arguments, press and enter the key submit and command to the command interpreter. There is an example of description string. The command is used to add a description to an interface. The string argument is a text entered by administrator such as description, connects to the main headquarter office switch. Send the ping or IP address. The command is ping and the user-defined argument is the IP address of the destination device, as in ping 10.10.10.5. iOS help features. In iOS context-sensitive help provides a list of commands and the arguments associated with those commands within the context of the current mode. To access context-sensitive help, enter a question mark at any prompt. So let's go to another slide. In this, we can see that iOS command syntax check. The command line interpreter checks an entered command from left to right to determine what action is being requested. In the hotkeys and shortcuts, commands and keywords can be shortened to the minimum number of characters that identify unique selection. For example, the configure command can be shortened to conf or config because configurator is the only command that begins with conf. An even shorter version of con will not work because more than one command begins with con. Keywords can also be shortened. As you can see, there is a support the following hotkeys. There is down arrow allows the user to scroll through command history. Up arrow allows the user to scroll backward through commands. Tab completes the remainder of a partially entered command. Control A moves to beginning of the line. Control E moves to end of the line. Control R display a line. Control Z exits the configuration mode and returns to user exec. Control C exits the configuration mode or aborts the current command. Control Shift 6 allows the user to interrupt an iOS process, etc., or we can say ping. As you can see, there is a packet tracer navigating the iOS. This is the lab establishing a console session with a TeraTerm. 2.2 Basic Device Configuration. Device names. Hostname appear in CLI prompts and can be used in various authentication processes between devices and should be used on topology diagrams. Without a hostname, network devices are difficult to identify for configuration purposes. Configure hostnames. Once the naming convention has been identified, and the hostname global configuration command is used to assign a name. So, if you will assign a name, you will go to the hostname. Limiting device access. Step 1. Secure network devices to physically limit access by placing them in wiring closets and lock racks. Enforce secure. Oh my god. Password as password. Kuya Raven, may tarantula. Ano ga to? May gagamba. Limit access. We can say configure. Configure passwords. Secure privilege exec access using the enable secret password global config command. As you can see, there is a secure privilege exec, securing user exec, and securing remote access. Good. In encrypt password, use the service password encryption. Global config command to encrypt all password. The start up config and running config files display most password in plain text. Banner messages. Banners are messages that are displayed when someone attempts to gain access to a device. May kaya ba ko config using a banner. Tatain na. Syntax cleaner. Ay, checker pala. Limiting access to a switch. Save the running configuration file. Cisco device use a running configuration file and a startup configuration file. Capture configuration to a text file. Configuration files can also be saved and archived to a text document for editing or reuse. Capture configure to a text file, ganun din yun. Packet tracer, configuring initial switch settings. There is topology, objectives, and background. In 2.3, address schemes. IP addressing overview. Interfaces and ports are included. Manual IP address